Hello, I'm Esme Murphy, and this is Talking Points, and we are talking rising insurance costs. In this Talking Points, we're going to look at why your car and home insurance rates have gone up so much, and why, sorry to say this, they are expected to continue to go up. In 2024, the average homeowner's insurance bill increased 15%, adding an average of $500 per year to people's bills. Car insurance costs have risen 55%, adding an average of another $500 per year. And the upward price pressure continues, especially here in Minnesota. Minnesota experienced 190 hail events in 2024. That's 3 times the national average. Minnesota consumers are also going to feel an added upward pressure on insurance rates from Minnesota wildfires. And here and across the country, President Trump's tariffs are making not only new cars more expensive, but old ones more costly to maintain and repair, all upping insurance rates. On top of that, consumers are often making the mistake of not knowing the difference between actual value and replacement value policies. Helping us to sort through the upward trend as well as what the state can do and what consumers should know is Minnesota's Commerce Commissioner, Grace Arnold. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
All right, first of all, I know that you regulate and oversee insurance rates and their increases. Can you just make a magic wand wave and let them all go down?
No, unfortunately not. We have kind of 2 roles in our role as regulator of the insurance industry. We need to make sure that companies can pay bills. That means that they need to take in enough premium, and they need to be able to have enough in what's called reserves, or kind of like a savings account for the carriers for when there are these big hailstorms, that they can actually pay your claims. So that's a consumer protection that I think folks don't think about a lot, but is really important to the work that we do. The second thing we do is to make sure that rates comply with Minnesota law, and they're called actuarially justified. It's a technical term.
Right.
It means that they are high enough to be able to pay claims, but not so high that they're excessive.
All right.
So it's a balance.
They have, and I think anybody listening to this will say, well, they have been excessive. They've gone up so much. Is this unprecedented, what's been going on the last couple of years?
We've certainly seen a lot higher rate increases than we've seen in previous years. I think there are a number of things that are contributing to that. You talked about that. So we have tariffs. We have...
And let's talk about the tariffs, because that's something that people might not expect. But the president's tariffs have obviously impacted new cars, but they've impacted the price of all parts. And
exactly. So if you think about anything that you're doing in your day-to-day life that costs more money, insurance companies, if they have to pay for that too, it will also cost them more money.
Okay.
So whether that's a repair or, part of your house that needs to come in from elsewhere, it's all going to get impacted by the tariffs.
Hail situations, we've got 3 times the average number of hail events. You've had some staggering hail price costs over the past few years. Is that because of climate change in terms of your scientific viewpoint, that you've had scientists advise you? Because I know that certainly our scientists here feel that is partially the case.
Absolutely. So what we have is more severe convective storms. Again, technical term, it's like bigger storms, more hail, and they hit a huge swath of the area. So if you have one that comes through, the Twin Cities, we're often getting $1 billion of claims because hail will hit cars, hail will hit roofs, and then all the replacement goes into insurance.
Well, 2022, Minnesota, $6.3 billion in damages from hailstorms, and one storm in 2023 in August was $1 billion. Let me ask you, are the events that we're hearing about that seem more dramatic than hailstorms, although for those figures they're not, but like hurricanes, earthquakes, all of those things, do those affect rates here in Minnesota?
Rates are state by state, so insurance is regulated at a state level. So if something is happening in Florida, that's Florida rates and Florida prices. Where that can come back to us is that insurers buy insurance for themselves. And when more of these events are happening across the country or across the world, the price of insurers buying their own insurance increases. And you can see that with climate change, more disasters, more risk, and the cost of having insurance for insurance carriers is going up.
And because of that, it does affect us.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's not a direct, there's a hail or there's a hurricane, but there's a global system that relies on, or that can absorb a certain amount of claims or disasters. But as we're all having more, the global system is feeling stress.
All right. Let me ask you about what's going on in other states where there are high incidents of claims. Let's talk about Florida, because they've created these pools, state insurance pools that governments have kind of sponsored, that people can join in, the insurers of last resort. If anybody knows anyone in Florida, it's kind of rocky, but is that a model that Minnesota might consider?
Minnesota's had what's called a FAIR plan, so these are kind of last resort carriers for quite a while, over 30 years. So we have that in place now. Traditionally, it's been used for a property that's on an island and can't get access to fire. There's not a fire unit that can come out to them. They wouldn't be considered insurable in a traditional sense. We have started to look at what's happening in other states. We will be thinking about whether our that FAIR plan needs to be updated. I think for now it's okay. We haven't seen a big influx like we have in other states, but it's certainly something we're watching for, and frankly something I'm grateful that we already have in place and we don't need to create.
Okay, because haven't we had at least one big insurer leave Minnesota?
We've had insurers that have some have left. I wouldn't say big. They have mostly been what we think of as kind of looking at all of their business. Maybe they have smaller lines of business, or they're really concentrated in a market, and they've decided that for business reasons that's not where they want to be. We have over 100 carriers offering coverage and over 700 that are licensed to offer coverage should they choose to.
Okay, let's talk about flood insurance, because there's always a lot of confusion about this. What insurance policies cover flood insurance, and where can you get them?
So your homeowner's insurance will not cover flood insurance unless you've bought something that is specific flood insurance. Specific
rider.
Yep. And so I think it's really important for anyone who lives near water, even if you don't think that you're in a floodplain or you're not in a, your mortgage says, well, oh, you're outside of the floodplain, really consider it. We have one of the lowest rates of flood insurance take up in the country. We have, I think, about 2% of our homeowners have flood insurance. You can see like what happened in Mankato last summer. Floods happen, water is around. When we have a lot of rain, you can get a flood event, and you can also get water into your basement from events that are different. Right. Sometimes that's not covered. Really have a conversation with your broker.
And I know you can't get it, a week in advance.
Yes, you need to have it in place beforehand.
Right, and obviously there are going to be places that are flooding across the country that never have flooded before.
Correct. Yeah, I think you think of a 100-year flood, and I think it's common for people to say, oh, well, there was a flood last year, there won't be another flood for 100 years, but it's a percent risk every year, and we were having more of these events over time, and I think those percentages will adjust over time. But really, you have the same risk every year of being flooded. Okay.
And how about Minnesota wildfires? We've had them before, but what's happened this past summer has been especially devastating with the loss of so many homes. What should consumers know about that?
Sure. I think having a conversation to see what coverage is available and make sure that your coverage will include wildfire. There are also a lot of things that you can do to your home, either for hail or for wildfire, that can protect it. And you can get insurance discounts for a lot of them.
Can a home be covered for fires and not be covered for wildfires?
It's possible. You should have a conversation to see. It kind of depends on the specific coverage, but it's definitely worth having a conversation to make sure you're covered for all kinds of fires.
Another thing you said that consumers should really know about is that there are changes in what policies considered to be a deductible. And this is a big one. I had not heard this. Can you explain that?
So, before you may think of a deductible as like a flat dollar amount. You pay $10,000 and then everything after that is covered, or whatever the case may be. In a lot of cases, particularly for hail as a specific peril has been converted into a percentage deductible. So instead of having a
is
flat
that for cars and homes?
It can be on both.
Okay, so it's a percentage deductible. Now, what does that mean?
So that means that your deductible is a percent of the value of your house. So you have to know the value of your house and then know that percent. What I like to say,
or the value of your car?
Same thing. Yep. Okay. So what I like to tell people is to say, when you're having a conversation with your carrier or your agent, ask what is covered and ask what's not covered. And then take an example. Say there's a hailstorm. I need to replace my roof because there's a hailstorm. What would my cost be? And you should be able to help, should be able to help you say, okay, it would be, $5,000 to cover if I needed a new roof, or I am getting a percentage value, which may be a little bit, fluctuate with the value of my home. That's a risk I'm willing to take.
Or
and
is it a flat deductible or a percentage deductible too?
You can have a conversation about which is which. I think really making sure to understand what's in your policy and doing it every year is super important.
All right, I've been reading about cases where consumers are so strapped, really, because this is adding so much money to their budgets that they're cutting back and trying to trim their policies, and they're ending up with policies that cover the actual cost, not the replacement cost. Can you explain the difference? Because a lot of people think they've got replacement and they don't.
Sure. So again, have a conversation to make sure you understand what's in your policy. The replacement cost is often a depreciated cost. So I'll give the example of my husband. He got rear-ended. He had a bike rack on the back. When he bought the bike rack, it was like $1,000. The insurance company paid him $250 for it because it was 5 or 6 years old. And so the cost, the value of that bike rack had depreciated over time.
But the cost of him getting another bike rack is $1,000.
Exactly. And so it's important to kind of understand how how that depreciation can work and what you would really be out. So that's why we say ask a lot of questions, really understand what risk you're taking on. You may be fine with it. You may be okay paying a lower premium to have a little bit more risk, or you might want to buy up in coverage to make sure you're really covered.
Just quickly, are insurance rates going to continue to go up?
You know, for now, we'll probably see a few more years of it. I think what I'm encouraged by is that there's a lot more conversation and frankly, a lot more creative conversation about what we can do in the insurance area. It's getting into how we can mitigate risks, how we can have stronger roofs to make sure that we aren't replacing roofs every time a hailstorm comes through. On wildfires, there's a lot of conversation about how to manage forests, but also how you can keep your own property in shape so that it's not as susceptible to wildfire.
All right, Commissioner Grace Arnold, thank you so much for coming by. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, really appreciate it.
And that does it for this edition of Talking Points. As always, feel free to email me with comments and suggestions at esme@cbs.com. Thanks so much for watching. For Talking Points, I'm Esme Murphy, WCCO News.